Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, Beyond One Size Fits All, Personalizing AI for Global Content. Before we start, we're going to wait for everyone to join. We have a few people here, but I would like to ask you a question. And basically, what have you been researching on Google or on ChatGPT about this specific topic? So if you can tell us in the chat, what what have you been recently Googling about this, or why you were interested to join about this topic, please tell us in the chat while we wait for others. For those who are joining right now, as I said, we're going to start in a few minutes. And right now, we're just asking you what is something that you've Googled or recently about this topic. So if you want to share with us about this, or if you want to tell us why you're joining the webinar, please let us know in the chat. And we're going to start just when everyone has joined. We still have some people joining. Okay, I think we have enough people. We're going to start the webinar. So let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to the session today. Today, we're going to be diving into how you can stop treating AI translation as a generic black box and start using your own data to drive human level quality. We're moving beyond good enough to publish ready translations, and we're going to be seeing this today. The agenda for the webinar is quite straightforward. We're going to start with the problem with good enough AI. Then we're going to explain why we think that personalized AI is the solution and also explain how that works. We're gonna see what that is like inside Lokalise with some live demo and some examples as well. And the key takeaways at the end to wrap everything up. We're gonna have some time for Q&A, so if you have any questions, please let us know during the webinar, and put it please in the question and answers box, because that helps us manage the questions and answers much better. And throughout the session, if you would like to be interacting, please go ahead as well and drop some stuff in the chat. Okay, moving on. Today I'm joined by two speakers. We're going to have Alesia, who is joining me today. She's a product manager at Lokalise. She's been focusing especially on improving translation quality for our AI translations, reduce manual reviews, and accelerate the continuous localization that is so important. She has a very interesting background. She was working as a customer success manager before her product manager role, and she was guiding enterprise teams on best practices. She's been in the industry for over 5 years, and having this customer side perspective, it helps her translate practical requirements into product strategy. And I'm very happy to have her speaking here today. And we also have Adam. He's a senior lead product manager at Lokalise, also in the AI machine learning team. He has a strong background in launching disruptive products in startups and scale-ups with global reach. And he's been working at Lokalise for a while now, helping build up innovative AI-based solutions and that have the aim to radically transform the localization industry. So we are really excited to have these two speakers. So without further ado, we'll have Adam start the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adam. I'm from the AI and machine learning team of Lokalise. Yeah, and I would like to talk with you about the AI translation quality and about generic and custom AI today. So, most of the times, Gen AI or generic AI delivers good translation already, a translation that very likely is going to be fluent. Often it is also an accurate translation, but it might not sound like you. So there might be wrong formality, there might be some weird terminology choice, and it can feel like it's inconsistent with your other content, right? So it just feels a little bit out of context. So in the end, it might sound like a stranger wrote it, not you, like not somebody that is familiar with your brand wrote it. So is that good enough? Sometimes, maybe, but probably not all of the time. And the reason with generic AI or with one size fits all AI is that it doesn't know you, right? So it doesn't know your tone, your terminology, it doesn't know your past translations, your overall content that you have, and it doesn't know your business and product context. So that's the reason why it sounds like a stranger. And the impact of that is that the translation kind of feel off-brand. They are in an inconsistent voice, and as a result, they are harder to trust. And if you want to improve this trust, then you need to invest into expensive human review and in fixing these translations, which kind of defeats the purpose of why using AI translation in the first place, right? You would use AI translation to get translations and localization faster and cheaper. But if you need to still involve humans to review it and to fix it, it really weakens the case for the AI. And why this happens, like why does AI kind of keep forgetting who you are is like by default there is no long-term memory, right? So it's not that we talk about when you use ChatGPT and you have your memory on, then of course ChatGPT learns about you, but this is on your individual usage. But if you're doing localization at scale, this doesn't work that easily. So there is, in general, no long-term memory. So when we trigger a translation, the LLM, the model doesn't know your past history. And also, it doesn't learn from it just translated for the next translation, right? So it kind of keeps forgetting. So there is no learning curve. So it's every time it feels like it translates your content for the first time. So it's kind of like having a new intern that just joined your company, and that intern is very capable in translation, so it can be capable linguist, but they don't know you. They don't know your past translations. They don't know your brand. They don't know your terminology at all, right? So they are able to provide only generic translation in the beginning, which makes it very inefficient. Have you experienced this with AI translations? Like that your translations felt slightly off, like a stranger wrote it? I think there should be a poll appearing now on your screen. If you are able to, can you just put it in the poll? That should just pop up. Thank you for the comments as well. Okay, let's see the results. Right, so you see that everyone have experienced this. Some of us all the time, some of us sometimes. So it's a very common problem with a translation. So how can we solve that problem? It's with personalization, right? So customizing or personalizing AI is the real solution here because generic AI translates well, but not like you. But custom AI translates like you. That's the difference here, right? So let's dive into this. The way how we do it, localize, how do we do the personalization is through RAG or Retrieval-Augmented Generation. What it does is that it retrieves the most relevant past translation examples and glossary terms and constructs something like a cheat sheet for AI to make the translation. So for every specific translation, the best or the most relevant examples from the past and the most relevant examples from the glossary are being put together in terms of cheat sheet, and they're provided to the LLM. So think about it in the parallel with the intern that I just mentioned before. So it's still an intern that is very capable in translation, but in this case, for every translation the intern needs to do, you provide them with a perfect cheat sheet. So you provide it with a list of most relevant past translations, showing how you translated before and how you would like to translate, what is the type of voice you would like to use, and also cherry-picked terms from your glossary, not the whole glossary, just the ones that are relevant for the particular translation. And you do it every time there is a new translation, right? So it's really like giving a cheat sheet of your brand's perfect answers before any test even begins. So this is basically how RAG works. And RAG is one of the ways how to personalize AI. The other very effective way is also fine-tuning, for example, fine-tuning the LLMs. But compared to fine-tuning, RAG is always up to date. So if I now translate one sentence and immediately after the second sentence, the first one can be used as context for the second one, right? So there is no retraining necessary here. Like it's always up to date. It is always aware of your past translations, of the past examples, even if they happened a minute ago. And unlike fine-tuning, there is no like costly and slow model retraining while having the same or very similar impact on the translation quality. Right? So, and also the big advantage of RAG is that it kind of seamlessly works with any mainstream LLM. So it works with Claude, it works with GPT, it works with Gemini. And for example, in our case, we are doing intelligent routing between different LLMs depending on the content type and depending on the language. So for example, for translations from English to French, we would use GPT. For translations from English to German, we would use Claude. And in both cases, RAG will be used in a similar way, right? If you will be doing fine-tuning, you would need to fine-tune multiple models, which is much more expensive and more tricky to do. And every time there is a new model, which happens like every 2 months from each vendor, you would need to retrain. With RAG, this is not necessary. So it's always up to date from like all the perspectives. And how it works under the hood is that from the customer perspective, the only setup that is needed is to have source text, like what you want to translate, and then set up translation memory or just some translation history with reviewed past translations that could be used as context and a glossary. Then the second step is retrieval, which is like Lokalise identifies your most relevant past examples, and then use it to augment the prompt to the Gen AI, right, to the large language model. And the augmentation is that cheat sheet that I mentioned to you before. Like there are maybe a couple more things that I talk about, but it's basically it. Right? It's that cheat sheet. And with that, the LLM generates highly personalized human-like translation with using all these contexts. And if I put it into like a simple comparison between Gen AI and custom AI, like the way how we prompt it with Gen AI, we are just telling it, translate this sentence, and that's it. With custom AI powered by RAG, the instruction is much more like, translate this like we would do. it, right? So leverage these past translation examples and follow the prescribed terminology to do it. So this is the difference in a nutshell between the Gen AI and custom AI that is powered by RAG. You might also feel like maybe you can achieve that with a style guide, because style guide is actually also a way how to customize. But before I get to that, I would like to show you a practical example of how RAG works in practice. So it's going to be a translation from English to Czech. I'm a native Czech speaker. That's why I'm picking this example. I wanted to ask, is there any other Czech speaker on the call? No? Okay, then. Never mind. I will explain the intricacies of the Czech language in this particular case. So the text to translate is pet parents get bonus points. Right? This is what I want to translate. And with Gen AI, the likely translation in Czech would be rodiče domácích mazlíčků získávají bonusové body. Let's look into that into detail. So the word parents here was translated literally as rodiče, which literally means parents in Czech. And also there is like an added word because pets is this, mazlíčku, but there is also this word domácích, which means something like domestic or household pets, right? So, which is normal in Czech. But like this word using the literal translation of word parents, the word rodiče, seems like kind of overly enthusiastic, right? In Czech language, it is something that a super enthusiastic that person would say to another person, right? But it's not something you would see like in a market, even a marketing communication. But it is a translation that is understandable. Like a native speaker would absolutely understand it. Let's look now how it would work with. And let's delete the annotation. How it would work with custom AI that uses RAG. So in this case, the cheat sheet that I mentioned before is this part, like the retrieved examples from the past. So the LLM the AI before it does the translation, sees these past examples and it sees that the words pet parents were translated as majitele mazlíčku, which majitele means owner, not parent in the literal translation, but it is a bit more natural translation in Czech. It's like more neutral. It would work on a wider audience. And it also omitted this word domácích, right? So it skipped this one in the past translations. It's not that it's the Gen AI translation was a wrong translation. It wasn't a wrong translation. But just in this case of this brand, they prefer shorter or punchier translations. And then what the custom AI did in the actual translation is here. So it's majitele mazlíčku, which just replicated how the brand used it in the past. Right? So this is the difference. Right? So the Gen AI translation is not horrible in this case. It's not like that nobody would understand it, but the custom AI translation sound like the brand sounded in the past, right? So like the other content sounded in the past. So it's consistent with all the other translations that that particular brand had. And that's what custom AI does really, really well. And that's when it beats generic AI. Okay. Was this understandable? Can you just put a brief yes in the chat or yeah, or use emoji? Yeah. All right, thank you. So you might feel like how it would work with the style guide. So let's look into that. What is the difference between the style guide and RAG? Style guide is also a form of personalization. It is a way how to personalize, but it's more of a instruction, right? So it's about saying, please sound warm or be informal or like be enthusiastic, things like that, which works, but is not as effective as giving proven examples through RAG, right? So this is like how we said it before. That's what RAG does. And with AI, the past examples are far superior to using a style guide, right? So if you show AI how it should look like what is the example from the past that is related to this, it can take the style, the terminology from it very easily, very seamlessly, and it usually works much better than the instruction. So that's the difference, right? So the style guide tells instruction, rec shows how it should be done, right? So that's the difference, how it works. Still, style guide has its place, but it is usually the most useful when you don't have enough context from the past, right? So you're starting translating into a new language, or you just don't have high quality past translations. So this is when style guide still makes sense, right, to use. But if you have good examples from the past, and it doesn't need to be many, it can be a couple hundred per language, RAG will most likely outperform style guide in the translation quality or in the customization. All right. And then why you should think about custom AI or personalized AI. It's because of its impact. It's actually, it can be huge. It can be really massive on the translation quality. What we've seen consistently is that the acceptance rate of the translations that are provided by custom AI, or in our case, we call it custom AI profiles, which is the way how we call the personalization feature. And in Lokalise, it can reach human level, right? So it can reach the same acceptance rate as professional human or human reviewed translations, which depends on customer, content type, language, etc., but it can be up to 90 to 99%, 95%. This is not some like theoretical number. This comes from guided evaluations with enterprise customers using real content, real workflows, where our customers' own human reviewers, their own translators, did the review, did the evaluation if the translations provided by custom AI were good enough to be published or not, right? So if they accepted it or not. So this is where this number comes from. And this has tremendous impact on the business case of localization, actually, because you can you can realize up to 97% savings if you reach this acceptance rate, right? So if custom AI provides the same translation quality as your human translations would have, or human review translations would have, the impact on the business case is massive or can be massive. It depends on the situation, depends on the content, and depends mostly on the quality of your past translations, of the context that you can provide. But if you have high quality past translations, you are able to achieve these numbers. So it's really amazing what custom AI can do for localization. And at Lokalise, we use RAG to customize AI, to personalize AI through our custom AI profiles. Now it's a feature that is in beta for several months already, but it will be generally available on selected plans from next week. And I would like to give the stage now to Alesia, and she will show you how it actually looks and works directly in our product. Please go ahead, Alesia.
Thank you, Adam. And now it's exciting demo time. So I'm going to share my second screen. And this is how AI profiles page looks like. So in general, for those of you who are not familiar, we have two translation engines in Lokalise. We have standard AI, which is AI-oriented translation, machine translations without context. And we have Pro AI, which is advanced AI translations that are taken into account context and use the features such as scoring and routing between different LLMs. So we see that our Pro AI is already using standard context, such as glossary and style guide. but it doesn't take into account the past translation, the personalization that Adam is talking about. So by default, you can think of a base profile as your Pro AI, and each of the profiles is providing a configuration or customization for AI. It provides the set of rules for Pro AI. So if you want to tweak the rules and make sure that it's not just the glossary and style guide that is taken into account, then you should be looking at the custom profiles, which are labeled with the custom tag and which are providing even more customization. And we have a profile based on the translation memory that is available for activation. And it takes examples from translation memory so that it can add them to the cheat sheet and improve the quality of AI. So if I click on Activate to Use, I will see the 3 generic steps, which allow us to set up the rules for AI and the place where the rules should apply in the form of projects. So the first step is configuring the routing. And by default, we recommend all users to use the routing because we know and we see based on the data which model is performing best on which type of language and content. But only if for specific reasons you are not allowed to use all the models in the pool, then this is where you can additionally customize it for yourself. And then the next step, let us select which context in the form of past examples we are sending to AI. And this is where we highly encourage people to select high quality translations only. So instead of sending the entire TM translation memory, this is where people can select the languages that they're confident in. So in this case, I set it up for English and I can select add more languages and basically say into AI that I'm confident in the quality of my translations from English to Polish and Russian. And this is what I want to be sending to AI. But you can also think about translation memory as a very big asset, very big database that has a lot of content. And some decisions may have been made by the reviewers or like the people like by humans some time ago based on context that was relevant some time ago. For example, that can be relevant for the old branding or for like old style that the customers required. So in this case, we also suggest to filter the translation memory by recency so that we are able to provide only the most recent content to AI and forget that also the old examples which don't reflect the necessary tone and style. And in the next step, we are selecting the projects where we want this setting to be activated. So in this case, I'll activate it for my AI profiles webinar project. And we will see the summary. We'll see that the status of the profile changed to active. And we also see that this set of rules applies in specific projects. So we can see that in all of our rest of the projects, for example, not mentioned here, we are still using the base AI profile that is using Pro AI with standard context like glossary and style guide. And let's look at like how it looks in practice. So I'm opening this project, and in the team settings, I can double check that indeed there is an AI profile applied for specific, with examples being sent for specific languages. And we'll try to replicate the example that Adam was referring to with Czech. But as I'm not fluent in Czech and I speak only Russian, I'll try to reproduce it and explain with the nuances of the Russian language. So let's imagine that we are translating the phrase "such a lovely day," and I'll double check that there is nothing in my translation memory at this point in time. I see only generic recommendations from standard AIMT, different engines, and I can translate it with Pro AI that taken context into account. In this case, it translated literally "such a lovely day." Прекрасный sounds like lovely, but let's say that I don't like it. I want our like branding to sound slightly differently, and I would say that I want to translate it like this. Какой чудесный день. which is still similar, but чудесный is more like wonderful, not lovely. And we can check that it's saved in the translation memory now for future use. And let's assume that we are now translating something similar, like today is such a lovely day, which has some similar phrases like lovely days here, but the punctuation is different, like the beginning of the sentence is different. And we can ask AI as well to translate it for us. And we see that the translation is сегодня такой чудесный день, which is similar to how we translated it before. So because we saved in translation memory and added this example to the cheat sheet that we want lovely to be translated as wonderful, we see that AI is replicating this in the new translations, which are not exactly the same. So this is what personalization means in this case. And AI profile based on translation memory works really well, especially when translation memory represents like one specific style and when it's like clean and recent. And for example, when it's used just for like a single content, for example, product strings. Or it works well when there are different translation memories for different content styles, like one translation memory in one project for legal, one for marketing. But there are cases when the styles blend. Let's think about the case where content types that intentionally should sound different, like marketing should sound very creative and legal should sound quite formal, can be averaged by AI if we send this cheat sheet with examples being used at the same time for the marketing and legal. So in this case, if you look at this example, please be advised, you will see that it's technically correct English and it's like probably like a bit fluent, but it sounds like a legal boilerplate and it doesn't sound like marketing. Whereas, for example, another example, don't miss it, sounds more like marketing. And this is how marketing will typically persuade, drive some action with their users. And on the other side, like this example looks really weird and inappropriate for legal content, something like if you got your back. Whereas the example as required by law provides the right level of neutrality for the legal style. So if you see that your marketing becomes a little bit more stiff and the legal becomes a little bit like creative, then this is exactly this voice collision problem in a nutshell. And the best solution in this case would be to use different data sets, providing context for AI in case of these two different types of content, which can be having two different translation memories, split by type and tone, or using different profiles. And now we'll look into how this exactly looks in practice. So kind of the next reasonable question is like, okay, how can we split the data if we already have this voice collision problem and we have like a translation memory with a lot of mixed content inside? And this is where we can think about two data sources. The first one that we've just shown is a translation memory. And you can think about it as a complete archive. It's large, it grows over time. It often contains mix of different types, quality levels, and decisions that your linguist made at different points in time under different constraints. And it's still very useful for use for consistency of translations, especially when the data is clean and recent. But there are cases where like it's possible to make it better. And if we look at the newly added circles for legal and marketing, then we see two clusters that represent subsets of the past translation, not entire translation memory, but just subsets of translations that are split by tone of voice. So one is for the marketing content and the second one is for legal. But we also see that they are much smaller in size than the translation memory because it's not just your entire marketing and legal content, but these are smaller sets of deliberately chosen translations that represent the highest quality and the best signal for AI. So this is what we refer to as curated or manually cherry-picked examples, which can be the best quality signal for large language models when you're translating with AI. And let's look into how this looks in product. So this is where we introduce additional types of profiles. So now it's second demo time. And so far I've showed you the translation memory profile, but there is also a possibility to create other types of profiles. And you can create like a different number of profiles which have very similar steps, except for the difference in the stage 2, where people can select a different set of examples as a data set. And instead of going through like all the stages, I will show you two pre-created profiles just to make it simpler. And at the first step, you're able to name this profile because you're creating profiles for different purposes and you need to be able to identify it. And you similarly can configure the rules for your AI, for example, which LLM or coding you should be able to use. The next step is very similar. We're selecting the languages for which we're confident in quality. But the key difference is here. So here, instead of relying on entire translation memory, we can select a different data source. And the first data source is tagged tags, where you can specify the tag name. So what it looks like in product is basically this small little tag that we can label as high quality signal for AI. And you can add this tag to more content across your projects and across your keys. And like probably some of you are wondering like that, thinking that it's a lot of work, but it's something that you can also filter and apply in bulk for the files, for the projects, for the content that you are confident in. So in this case, you can select all content in specific projects using specific filters and bulk tag it by clicking on the add tag. So in this case, AI forgets about the translation memory and it will not take into account these translations. It will only look at these tagged keys and only they then will be sent as context to AI. And the next steps are similar. So you select the tag and you assign it to the project. But we also have a third type of AI profile or RAG, where instead of relying on the tag data, you're able to select review translation status as a data source. And we're speaking about this little icon. So if you already have a established human review process where people are checking translations and marking them as reviewed, then essentially we'll be just looking at only at the translations that are marked as with this glasses icon. So we'll again forget about the translation memory. We'll completely ignore tagged keys. And in this case, we'll just only look at these two translations. And at top of this, we can filter it by projects. So we can say that we don't want just any review translation in this project. We want to use review translations only from a specific project. For example, our marketing content project where we think the quality is the best. So in this case, we're calculating the examples in this project that AI is able to use, and we're assigning it to another set of projects. So essentially, we can say that we want to use our high quality data from marketing content, but we can use it whenever we are translating for any marketing content, because any marketing content can benefit from that set of high quality examples that we are using. So essentially, just to kind of sum it up, depending on the use case, we have 3 different types of RAG for the source, and they are applicable in different use cases. So the first one, translation memory, is best when translation memory is clean and it's recent. It represents a single tone of voice. And the benefit is that it's instantly available. So you don't need to manually select the data and apply the tags. The tagged keys can be a really good approach when you need a cleaner, trusted data set. For example, you don't trust the translation memory, or you just don't know which examples there are good. And this is where you can create that curated set of examples. And this is where you can split the content by the tone of voice. And the reviewed keys is very similar to tagged keys, but it's really powerful when you already have an established review process. Because in this case, you don't need to apply any extra manual effort for tagging keys. And it's really powerful because RAG is very fast in terms of kind of leveraging new examples. Kind of the impact is similar to learning and unlearning, because depending on the data source, if you use TM, then whenever the new translation gets saved to the TM, or if you use reviewed status, whenever new translations get reviewed, or whenever they get tagged, this is exactly when those examples get added to the cheat sheet and like start being like surfaced to AI. And it works the other way around. So if you try the AI profiles and you see that the quality is still not there, then there is likely that there is something confusing AI. And as soon as you remove those bad examples, then the output can start improving. And the third power of RAG is that it's very selective. So it uses only the past relevant examples that it adds to the cheat sheet. But there is always a but argument. You need to be really careful with sending the right type of examples, because if you're sending bad examples, like obsolete copy, old terminology, old branding to AI, then this is where AI can think that this is a good example. This is actually the type of customization that the customer wants, and it will make it sound like you, but probably like you in the past, or like not how the most recent you. And this is what our customers are saying to us. Like we see some quotes here. So like we have a customer who said that it's really sustainable and scalable because it runs automatically under the hood and it provides personalized translations. Then we see that another customer who is mentioning that for them the impact is similar to if the model is learning from examples, and that over time it gets closer to their preferred style. And another quote, another user says that AI profiles and RAG really calmed down a lot of issues that they've been having with AI. So meaning that over time, AI translation started to improve. And once people made the corrections and like saved content to the TM, then AI accepts the changes and starts reproducing the correct format in similar cases. So this is exactly similar to the example with the lovely, wonderful weather. Like as soon as I added my preference, this is where AI started to reproduce it. And I want to leave this with three key takeaways for us. So the first one is that generic AI might be not always enough for the production translations. And it's not because the capabilities are not there. It can still translate often fluently, but it may just not sound like you. And because of this personalization missing, people need to make some edits, do the rework, and this overall kind of damages the reputation of AI. The answer to that is personalization that is able to drive the quality. And it's like sending your own data, your own examples, what often makes AI closer to the human work or almost indistinguishable from human work. But with a very important caveat that the translation examples and the context needs to be recent and good. And then the third point is that the impact is actually measurable with the solution that we are providing, custom AI, powered by RAG. And it's not just a sentiment that it feels better. It's something that we validated with actual customers on their own data, as Adam mentioned, and it has potential to achieve up to like 95% of already published content. And with on this note, I would like to hand over it to Marta so that she gets you up to speed with the past webinars, and then we can move to Q&A.
Thank you, Alesia, and thank you, Adam, as well. Before we move into Q&A, I wanted to just do a small promo. Basically, we've had some other webinars that you might find interesting because they're related to this topic. So Alesia, in autumn last year, she hosted one webinar about transition quality, but quantified. So basically, we have a feature inside Lokalise that is called transition scoring, and she covered why transition QA and in general scoring is important. And then we had earlier in autumn as well, I think, or September, something like that. We had another webinar with Sasho, who is one of our engineering managers at Lokalise, and he was covering as well this topic of custom AI. But in particular, it was a deep dive between RAG and fine-tuning models, which is another way to customize the AI. So if you haven't attended, I would advise that you watch them on demand. And right now we're going to move on to the Q&A section. We have some questions that have been coming up in the Q&A box. Thank you very much for doing that. If you haven't yet, you still have a bit of time to add them there. And we can also basically maybe stop sharing the screen so that we can address the questions and everyone can see everyone answering. So I'll go ahead and start with the first question. And if we don't answer the questions live, by the way, we will send the answer to the right person via email, as well as the recording of this webinar. So let's get started. The first question we have is about context. And the question says, how can I add context about the short-term rental industry to Lokalise so I can get AI translation relevant to the STR industry and Lang specific market? Does anyone want to take this one, Alesia, Adam?
Sure. Yeah. So the way how to add this context is you'll so either you can enter it into a style guide. So if you don't have past translation reflected, you can add it to style guide. Just give a brief information about it. But I think more powerful would be if there is a specific terminology, I would add it to glossary. If there is very specific terminology to your industry, add it to the glossary. And the most powerful would be if you have past translations that reflect the language of the industry, of the market, the way how you want to sound, and you have them in Lokalise, you can use it for the custom AI profiles. So as Alesia showed, either through translation memory or through tag translations. And this would be the most powerful way how to ensure that the custom AI uses the right language in this case.
Thank you. By the way, some of these questions maybe we've already answered with the live demo, but I think it's important to maybe repeat some of the answers so that you also have your answer. So we have a question that talks, how does RAG differ from translation units in ATM? Can custom AI leverage ATM?
Yes. So TM is just one of the sources of data that examples can be retrieved from. And RAG is more of a method which retrieves examples from TM or another place and augments the prompts and lets AI LLMs to generate translations using them into account.
Great. We're going to move on to the next one. Is this RAG workflow customizable per specific customer based on their source material or built to work with specific type of source material? What prep needs to be done to most effectively use it?
I can take this one. It's it's personalized for every customer because it takes your specific translation examples from your specific translation memory or from your specifically typed example keys and being sent to AI. So it will be sounding like the closest to you like as possible as compared to the cases when the content is translated, generalized, and like trained on the overall industry domain because it takes your own examples into account.
Great. Next question. Does RAG-based LLMs still use glossaries, style guides, and visual/textual context as well?
So I can take this one. Yeah, so it still uses glossary, it still uses text descriptions, and it can use style guides. But if there are no relevant past examples of historical translation, so if there are, and RAG can retrieve them, we don't use style guide because the examples are more powerful than style guide, and they can sometimes confuse. It can be confusing if there are both examples and a style guide, and they might contradict each other. It's actually very common. So if there are past examples, we do not use style guide, but if there are no relevant past examples, the style guide is still applied. So all these extra sources of context are still used.
Okay, we have another question that starts with a context, important as we know. The problem with RAG that we encountered is that at times, even the most relevant segments that RAG retrieves are not really relevant to the current translation. How do you make sure that the reference that is provided to the LLM is good enough?
Sure. So yeah, this is a common problem. I think there are two important parts of this. So one is to make sure that the source for RAG is set up right? So uh, not to have set up the same RAG for all types of content, right? So if you are translating UI, so it's like it's the UI type of content, then you should have the source uh, only for translations that are related to the UI, right? So it doesn't mix with, for example, your marketing content, right? So this separation is important. So you have different custom AIs, or in our case, different custom AI profiles with different sources depending on the type, on the content type. So that's the first part. And the second part is like how the retrieval itself works. So we are constantly improving this, right? So we are trying to find the most relevant translation from the past through different methods. Like there's quite a bit of matching in that algorithm there, and we are constantly developing it to be sure that we try to retrieve the most relevant translation. But also to say most relevant doesn't necessarily mean that for example, the example that I used with the bad parents, it retrieved very like similar translation from the past. But even if they are not similar, if they do not share the same keywords, they still can be relevant because they show the style, right? So they show your brand voice, etc. And LLMs are very powerful to infer from different types of translations what type of language you want to produce, right? So even if they don't look like they have the same keywords, etc., they are still powerful context, right? So mm, that's like what I wanted to add to this. But yeah, it can happen that RAG doesn't retrieve or is not able to retrieve the like a very relevant example, right? That can happen if you use it at scale. But even like something that seems relatively like not that relevant, it actually can really help LLM to understand what your style should be.
Thank you. Okay, next question is about acceptance rates, and it's what is it based on and what QE do you use?
So the way how we calculate acceptance rates, so both in our product and also outside in like guided evaluations, is that we present an AI translation or a human translation, and uh, accepted means that the reviewer or the user there accepted it, used it in their product, and or published it without making any change. So that means accepted, right? So they took it and said like this is published ready, and I'm not and didn't do any single change, not a single character. That means successful acceptance, right? If they rejected the translation or they use it but they changed it, then we consider this as a rejection, right? So this doesn't count towards the acceptance rate. So if we say 90% of translations are accepted, it means 9 out of the 10 translations the user looked at and used and made them publish ready without any changes. This is the methodology behind our acceptance rate.
Okay. Next one is what if your translation memory is mostly based on non-human checked AI translations? With our company, only the Dutch translations have been somewhat edited by the copywriter before me. So the memory is not super reliable source.
I can take this one. So this is exactly where other types of RAG, where you can tag specific keys or RAG translation is reviewed, would be very helpful at addressing this so-called cold start problem when there is no context for AI. And if you think that if most of your translations were AI generated, AI has probably already picked the most relevant terms that it thinks, or like the most popular terms and words related to your domain. So if you send examples to AI of AI translation that were not checked by humans and that were not edited, then there is not enough, not new context for LLM to be aware of. In this case, what we suggest is to order translate like human review process for at least 500 segments, where you can like, appoint external linguists or some services from Lokalise where you create that starter set where like you invest in personalization, people check translations, and then you can reuse that same set of human checked verified translations for all of your next AI translation that will be AI generated only. And this will already improve the output for the future AI translations, which will even not go through human review.
Okay, I hope that answers that question. We have a few more. Let's see if we can fit them all before the end of the webinar. But next question is, what if your translation memory is mostly based on non-human checked? Ah, no, sorry, that's the one I
That's
just
one.
read. I'm so sorry. Okay, the next one is, I worry that for auto translations, it should have had localization human-based first, like in the Czech example where you personally edit. We don't have the capacity at the moment for locals to check all the languages. So I guess it's a
So,
question.
so it's not really about checking all the content in all the languages, right? So you need, for RAG to work, you need some solid basis to, for example, have 500 examples per language in the past, right? So that's already going to be powerful, even if it's just 500 translations. If it's more, it's better. Like more, the better. But even 500 is definitely gonna make a difference. So you can approach it in a way that you want to establish this basis in any language you provide, that you do the first 500 human review translations, and then custom AI with RAG can scale it to another million, right? So you invest into those 500, and the next 1 million custom AI will do much faster and much cheaper, like scaling the quality of those 500, right? So, and if you don't have the capacity, like Lokalise is super happy to assist you with this, right? So we can for our partners, we can help you with setting up that basis. So
Perfect. I'll make sure to check it so I don't ask the same question. Okay, like next question and probably last one for today. Can I set the start date of the translation memory that is used for every language individually?
Now, at this point, it's not possible. So in this case, you either need to define one date that you're comfortable for, like all the languages that you're sending examples for, or in this case, you can play with other types of RAG. But this is something that we are aware of. So we'll look into this feedback going forward in more detail.
Great. Okay, so we don't have more time for more questions today. If there was a question that wasn't answered, we'll get back to you over email. And remember that you'll get the recording of the session. So thank you, Alesia. Thank you, Adam. And thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar today. And see you next time.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.